Within the golden walls of the world's mightiest empire, a ruler declared himself a living god, and his palace became a cage of absolute horror. This is not the story of a battle. This is the story of a prison, built not with iron, but with rules, fear, and a terrible, unyielding silence. You know his name from the legends of war. King Xerxes, the Persian ruler who led a colossal force against Greece. History paints him as the warrior king, the builder of impossible monuments. But the most devastating battles of his reign weren't fought on distant fields. They were fought every single day in the place he called home. What was life like inside the royal household for the women who were supposed to be the most privileged people on earth? What happened when the man at the center of this world believed he was divine? The truth is darker than any Hollywood fantasy. It is a tale of psychological warfare, of a paradise designed to poison its inhabitants, of a dynasty that perfected a form of control so complete it robbed its victims of the very concept of freedom. To understand it, we must look beyond the stone and gold, and into the silent corridors of the human heart. Let's begin at the moment the trap was sprung. In 486 BC, Xerxes took the throne. From that day forward, a ritual called proskynesis killed his humanity. Anyone approaching him had to throw themselves face first to the ground. He could never be looked in the eye without permission. He could never be spoken to first. He spent the rest of his life inside a bubble of absolute, crushing deference. Imagine a world where every single conversation, every glance, every gesture is a lie designed to flatter your power. What does that do to a man's soul? It builds a wall that separates him from the warmth of genuine connection, that replaces companionship with sycophancy, and that leaves only the cold, echoing chamber of his own will. This was the foundational lie of the Persian court, that a man could be a god among men. It was a lie that required everyone else to play their part as devout worshippers, and the cost of this performance was the very essence of human relationship. The answer lies with the person who taught him this cold reality, his mother, Atossa. Daughter of Cyrus the Great, she knew the royal court was a nest of vipers where family could be your deadliest enemy. She had seen brothers poison brothers, had witnessed coups unfold in the dead of night, and understood that in the game of empires, blood was the most expendable currency of all. Her lesson to her son was brutal: trust no one. Control everything. Show not a flicker of weakness. She didn't raise a king. She forged a weapon who saw other people as tools, as extensions of his own divine will, to be used, discarded, or broken as the moment demanded. This was the poison seed planted in his mind, a seed that would grow into a forest of paranoia and absolute authority. Absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it systematically erases empathy, brick by psychological brick, until all that remains is the sterile architecture of command. Now, let's enter the Gilded Cage itself, the royal Andarun. This was not a harem of casual pleasure, as popular imagination often suggests. It was a calculated, political engine, a sealed universe designed for one purpose: the control and management of royal bloodlines and political alliances. Xerxes seems to have had one principal queen throughout his life, a mistress. She was a powerhouse, commanding vast estates, leading her own household troops, holding audiences with foreign dignitaries, and even overseeing major construction projects across the empire. Ancient tablets suggest her influence was tangible, her authority woven into the fabric of the state itself. But here's the horrifying catch, the psychological twist that defined everything. All her power existed only because Xerxes allowed it. It was power on loan, granted by the god-king's whim. He could snatch it away with a word, reducing her from a sovereign in her own right to just another woman behind a locked gate. This was the double bind of the royal woman, immense influence coupled with utter contingency. Her world was one of terrifying fragility. The women of the household, the queen, the princesses, the noble relatives, lived in breathtaking luxury, draped in silks worth a fortune. They dined on delicacies shipped from the edges of the known world, were adorned with jewels that captured the light of 1,000 lamps, and were attended by armies of servants whose sole purpose was to anticipate and fulfill their every desire. Yet they were prisoners. High walls and locked gates sealed them from the world. They could watch life from above, see the bustle of the city, hear the distant sounds of commerce and celebration, but they could never touch it. They were spectators of a life they could not live. The only men allowed inside were the king and eunuchs, servants specifically altered to pose no threat. This created a society within a society, a world of women and neutered men, its dynamics entirely shaped by its isolation. And the most sinister part? This was sold to them as the highest honor. Their cage was so beautifully decorated, they were taught to worship its bars. From childhood, these women were conditioned to believe that their seclusion was a mark of divine favor, that their separation from the common world was what made them sacred. They internalized their own imprisonment, defending the very walls that held them. This is the hallmark of the most effective oppression, when the victim cannot recognize the chains because they have been polished to look like jewelry. The Andarun was not just a physical space. It was a state of mind, a psychological landscape where privilege and punishment were inextricably linked, where the greatest comfort was also the most profound confinement. For decades, the system hummed along. Official carvings on the great stone walls of Persepolis spoke only of harmony, prosperity, and divine order. The empire stretched from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, and at its heart, the palace presented a flawless facade of serene control. Everything was perfect. Everything was according to the will of Ahura Mazda, the great god who had chosen the Achaemenid line. Then something shattered. The flawless machine developed a crack, and through that crack, we can glimpse the terrifying reality that usually remained hidden. Our main source for this rupture is the Greek historian Herodotus, writing decades later. His account may be biased, may be tinged with the perspective of Persia's great enemy, but its psychological details are chillingly precise. They ring with a terrible human truth that transcends simple propaganda. Herodotus gives us a story, a specific incident that acts like a surgical probe, cutting through the ceremonial gold to reveal the raw, pulsing nerves of power, jealousy, and revenge beneath. After his catastrophic defeat in Greece, a humiliated Xerxes returned home. The god king had been bested by a coalition of scrappy city-states. His divine aura was tarnished, the illusion of invincibility cracked. It is in this context of wounded pride and shaken identity that Herodotus places a disturbing tale. According to him, the king became obsessed with the wife of his own brother Mezistes. This woman, whose name history didn't even bother to save, possessed something rare and dangerous in that court, a moral compass and the courage to follow it. When Xerxes made advances, she refused him. Think of the sheer will that required. Saying no to a man who believed the universe itself bent to his desires, a man who could erase her and her entire family with a single command. Her refusal was an act of astonishing bravery, a tiny, defiant spark in a world designed to extinguish all such sparks. A normal tyrant might have forced the issue or simply killed her. Xerxes did something far more twisted, revealing the peculiar sickness of his conditioned mind. He turned his attention to her daughter, Artane, his own niece. She did not, or could not, refuse. Perhaps she was flattered. Perhaps she was terrified. Perhaps she saw it as a path to influence in a world where women had so few avenues for agency. The affair began, but Xerxes, stung by the mother's rejection, needed more than a new mistress. He needed a cruel, symbolic demonstration of his power. He needed to prove that every refusal was meaningless, that every no could be circumvented and used to inflict deeper pain. He promised Artane anything she wanted, a blank check from the ruler of the world. And she, perhaps naively or perhaps with a calculated eye, asked for a unique, magnificent robe personally woven by Queen Amestris. It was an object of supreme status, a one-of-a-kind garment woven with gold thread and the priceless dye of the murex snail, a symbol of the queen's identity and position. Xerxes gave it to her. This was no simple gift of affection. It was a deliberate, public insult to the queen, a calculated act of psychological violence. He was weaponizing his mistress against his wife, using the young woman as a pawn to humiliate the most powerful woman in the empire. This is the inverted morality of absolute power. The suffering of others becomes your sport, their emotions become chess pieces in your game, and creating conflict is a way to demonstrate your control over the very dynamics of human pain. When Amestris saw her personal garment on her husband's lover, she understood the game immediately. And she, a master player in this brutal political arena, planned a revenge of ice-cold precision. She did not rage. She did not confront Artane directly. Instead, she aimed her retaliation with the sniper's focus of someone who understood the rules of this world perfectly. She waited for the king's birthday feast, a massive public celebration with a sacred, unbreakable tradition. The monarch was obliged to grant any request made of him on that day. It was a law of the court, witnessed by all the nobles, satraps, and generals of the empire. Before this assembled power structure, Amestris made her demand. She did not ask for Artane. She asked for Mazis's wife, the woman who had refused Xerxes. She targeted the innocent, the virtuous one. Xerxes was trapped by his own customs. He knew what this meant. He begged her, in front of everyone, to choose something else: cities, armies, chests of gold. She refused, holding him to the very protocol that underpinned his divine authority. The innocent woman was handed over. What followed is one of the most barbaric acts recorded from antiquity. Amestris ordered the woman mutilated. Her breasts, nose, ears, lips, and tongue were cut off. She was then sent back to her husband as a living, broken message. The palace walls didn't protect lives. They concealed atrocities. The message was clear to all, but layered. On the surface, any object of the king's desire, even an unwilling one, would be annihilated, cross the queen, and face utter destruction. But the deeper message was even more psychologically devastating. Virtue itself was a punishable offense. Your morality was your crime. Your loyalty to your husband, your courageous no, was what marked you for annihilation. You should have submitted. In the Andarun, the only safety lay in complicity, in accepting your role as an object. Resistance, even moral resistance, was a death sentence not just for you, but for your humanity. Mazis, upon seeing his wife, revolted. The horror of what had been done to her, the absolute injustice of it, ignited a fury that overrode all loyalty. He and his sons gathered their forces and raised the banner of rebellion. But the system was too vast, its mechanisms of control too finely tuned. The revolt was crushed swiftly. Mazis, his sons, his entire family, everyone connected to that bloodline, were hunted down and executed. An entire branch of the royal family obliterated, all because one man's wounded ego was treated as a divine command, and because the system's response to a crack was not to fix it, but to annihilate the area around it. The incident was a fire that burned everything it touched to ash, leaving only a lesson written in blood for those who remained. Was this a one-time horror, a singular eruption of savagery in an otherwise orderly court? Or was it a glimpse of the normal temperature of life in the Andarun, a rare moment when the curtain was pulled back? The Persian records, meant to project eternal godly order, are silent. They speak of triumphs and buildings, not of mutilation and family massacres. But we know the system's design. We know its purpose was absolute control. We know that after Greece, Xerxes spent his final years increasingly withdrawn, paranoid, a prisoner in his own palace, focusing on building projects and Private pursuits. The atmosphere in those sealed quarters must have been one of suffocating dread. Every glance could be a threat, every whispered conversation a potential conspiracy. Trust was impossible. For the women, this paranoia from the top would have trickled down as an even tighter web of surveillance, suspicion, and silent terror. The beautiful cage had become a pressure cooker. The system, in the end, consumed its creator. In 465 BCE, Xerxes was murdered in his own bed, not by a foreign assassin or a disgruntled satrap, but from within the innermost circle of trust. The commander of his royal bodyguard, a man named Artabanus, led the conspiracy. The god king was killed by the very shield meant to protect him. But the conspiracy didn't end there. It revealed how deeply the poison of distrust had seeped. Artabanus then went to Xerxes' younger son, Artaxerxes, and told him that his older brother, Crown Prince Darius, had committed the murder. He presented false evidence, manipulated the young prince's grief and rage. Artaxerxes, believing the lie, killed his own sibling. The royal household had become a machine that devoured itself, where brother killed brother on the basis of a lie told by the father's protector. It was a perfect, horrific parable of the world Atossa had warned about and helped create. A world where family was the ultimate threat, a prophecy that fulfilled itself through paranoia and violence. For the women inside, Xerxes' death changed nothing. The Andarun continued. The system of control, isolation, and political marriage persisted for generations. Artaxerxes I and his successors maintained the structure. Royal women continued to be political assets, married to consolidate power, often to their own half-brothers in unions that tightened the dynastic knot but strangled personal choice. They lived and died in a gilded labyrinth, and with each passing generation, the weight of tradition grew heavier. The cage became more familiar, its contours more accepted. For many, the idea of a different life became unimaginable. The ultimate victory for any system of control is when the captive forgets the feel of the open sky. The ruins of Persepolis stand today as a monument to imperial glory, to ambition etched in stone. But their stones also hold other memories. They hold the echoes of silent footsteps on polished floors, of conversations held in hushed tones behind screens, of lives measured not in achievements but in survival. They hold the ghostly imprint of lives lived entirely at the pleasure of a man who thought he was a god. This story is a warning that echoes through time. When we place any human being beyond accountability, when we confuse power with divinity and control with order, we don't create a paradise. We build a beautiful cage. We construct a system where humanity is the first sacrifice on the altar of authority. And eventually, inevitably, the lock clicks shut on everyone inside, the guards, the rulers, and the captives alike, all equally trapped in the sterile, silent world of their own creation. If this exploration of power's hidden costs resonated with you, if this journey into the silent heart of ancient tyranny made you think, please give this video a like. It truly helps the channel Winds of Thought grow, allowing us to bring more of these forgotten stories into the light. Thank you for watching.